Hello everyone. My name is Priyanka, and today, good evening. And today I'm going to present a virtuous ascent marriage and the making of middle class morality in Pamela. So, this is my academic and presentation details. This is table of content, and let's begin with introduction. Pamela, or A Virtue Rewarded by Samuel Richardson is a epistolary novel. So first we have to know that what is epistolary novel. Novel is as written as a series of documents exploring a servant girl's moral resistance and eventual marriage into her master's class. The novel is heavily invested in social hierarchy, morality, and virtue, written as a moral currency in 18th century England. Pamela's virtue is not only a personal but becomes a symbolic capital tools she uses to negotiate social mobility. The marriage is presented as both reward for virtue and a mechanism of ideological regulation of gender and class. Key tensions include that class subjection, moral superiority, and the negotiation of equality despite hierarchical constraints. So let's focus on my research question. How does Samuel Richardson's Pamela construct female virtue as a tool for social mobility, and in what way does marriage function as both a moral reward and a reformation of middle class and patriarchal values in 18th century England? So my hypothesis is in Pamela, Samuel Richardson portrays female virtue, particularly chastity and obedience and moral integrity, as a form of social and moral capital that enables upward mobility, while marriages function simultaneously as a reward for virtue and mechanism to reform middle class and patriarchal norms in 18th century England. So, in 18th century, what is the moral landscape? The 18th century show the emergence of moral middle class, and where virtue and respectability become measure of social worth rather than birth or wealth. Pamela mirrors that culture shift. Her chastity and obedience become forms of moral capital, symbolizing middle class ideals, and virtue serve as a social currency, allowing a lower born to claim dignity and moral superiority over the corrupt elite. The novel aligns with Protestant ethic of industry, modesty, and self-discipline, reinforcing beyond domestic morality. Female virtue was both a tool of empowerment and a mechanism of control, securing class ascent while maintaining patriarchal order. So let's focus on virtue as a social and moral capital. In Pamela, virtue functions as a symbolical capital, a moral resources that enable Pamela's ascent from servitude of gentility. His chastity, humanity, and piety operates as a currencies of social mobility, legitimizing her worth in class based on society. Richardson transformed feminine virtue into social power, aligning moral purity with middle class and respectability protest, ethics of discipline and restraint. Pamela's resistance to Mr. B evidence that becomes an economic and moral negotiation, proving that moral integrity, not lineage, determines true values. Her letters act as a performance of virtue, shaping her identity through narrative, self-discipline, and emotional transparency. Yet, her eventual marriage shows virtue's double bind and means of empowerment that ultimately reinforces patriarchal order. So, in Pamela, the most important marriage and the ideology of reward. In Pamela, marriage serves as both moral and recompense and social regulation, transforming private virtue into public legitimacy. And Richardson narrative moralized marriage as a mechanism of moral reform, where B's redemption mirrors Pamela's social evolution. The marriage signifies the fusion of moral worth and class privilege, legitimizing middle class ideals of domestic virtue and respectability. Pamela's letter and self narration construct the moral framework for her own material fate, demonstrate how virtue is performed as a witnessed. So we can see here, so in Pamela, virtue as a reward, and being good is a freedom. So gender, let's focus on gender power and domestic morality. In Pamela, gender roles are central because of female virtue is both empowering and constructing, determining moral and social legitimacy. Mr. B's authority demonstrates patriarchal power, yet his moral reform depend on Pamela's resistance, showing interdependence of gender's role. And domestic morality in novel is ideological tool and aligning a private sphere with middle class values of chastity, humanity, and self discipline. Marriage consolidates gender power. Pamela gains social status, but her empowerment is structured within a patriarchal expectations. The novel reflects borders 18th century tensions where women's virtue is publicly visible but socially policed, linking moral behavior to social mobility, class mobility, and the myth of equality. In Pamela, on upward, mobility is despite as a conditional and tightly bond of moral virtue, not just talent or merit. So, despite her marriage, her servant origin remains visible, showing that social mobility is but patrial symbolic rather than absolute. The novel critiqued upper class corruption and suggesting that moral integrity not birth defined worth but only within a framework and by patriarchal society. So Protestant ethic and making of middle class. So Richardson and Pamela reflect Protestant ethics and emphasize the discipline, modesty, piety, and self-restraint as a marker of moral and social values. And the novel illustrates the internalizing of Bridgeworth's value, showing how Protestant ethics underpin both genders, expectations, and class consequences. So the critical reflection and conclusion is Pamela illustrates the interplay of virtue, marriage, and social mobility, showing how personal morality can influence class positioning. The novel highlights tension between empowerment and patriarchal control. Pamela gains status but remain a subject of social expectations. While virtue is rewarded, the reward is fame within existing social hierarchies, reflecting the patriarchal and conditional nature of class mobility. Overall, Richardson's work negotiates morality, gender, and class, offering a blueprint of understanding 18th century boundaries of ethics. So this is the learning outcome and these are the references. So if you have any question, feel free to ask.
My question is, do we still link women's worth to purity like Pamela?
Even today, people still judge women by their how they dressed and how they think, and even today society will judge us like the, we can say that society is judgmental, like virtue replaced by image in judgment didn't disappear, and uh, we can say that's it.
My question is, Would Pamela be seen as empowered or submissive now?
Pamela could be seen as both way. Like some people might say that Pamela is strong because she stands for herself, and other people might say that Pamela is matlab, she marry Mr. B. So probably she is probably in this age she might be seen as a strong girl, and that's it. This is from my side. Thank you.